Hello, friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. My name is Daniel Fontenot, and today we will continue to study Daniel chapter 6. The first part, I would encourage you to view that first video on Daniel chapter 6, and that video was something to the effect of the most important issue facing the world. Or what is the most important issue facing the world? Okay, yeah. The most important issue facing our world. And so, like I said, we're going to continue studying Daniel chapter 6, and I hope that you do view that first video. And I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning of that first one, that these things we're going to read, as in all of God's Word, they speak to us at the end of the world more than they spoke to the times in which they were written. Okay, the prophets wrote more for our time than for theirs. The Bible tells us that in various places, in particular 1 Corinthians 10:11. So, and we, as I have already stated, that Daniel 6 is a symbol of the end of the world, a symbol of the Sunday law crisis. Okay? The time when the mark of the beast will be imposed upon the inhabitants of the earth. And what was the central issue, as we brought out in the last presentation? The central issue was the law of God. The same will be at the end of the world. The central issue and the great controversy between Christ and Satan is God's law. No matter what the ministers and preachers and popes and bishops and cardinals and on tell you. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 7 tells us, it pleased, actually it's not just verse 7, 1 through 7, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king sought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel, in other words, fault against Daniel, concerning the kingdom, tried to find where maybe he did some things wrong and damaged the kingdom of Medo-Persia. But they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Again, this tells us that the central issue is the law of God. Can it be obeyed? Should we obey it or not? Then those presidents and princes assembled together, as in Isaiah chapter 8, they assembled together to the king, and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains, have consulted together to establish a royal statute, and to make a firm decree, that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree, and sign the writing, that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. All right. So let's talk about the decree, this firm decree. Isaiah 10 verse 1 tells us, Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. And what will ye do in the day of visitation, and in the desolation which shall come from afar? To whom will ye flee for help? And where will ye leave your glory? So, and I failed to mention at the beginning of this presentation, the name of this presentation is How Will Seventh-day Adventists Respond to the Sunday Law Decree? That's a question we need to each individually as Seventh-day Adventists answer for ourselves. Okay? Before, let me emphasize, before that Sunday law is enforced. You know, Revelation 3 and verse 10 tells us, and I used to know it, I know it by memory, Revelation 10 verse 3 tells us, I can't believe I'm going to have to go look it up. Revelation 3 and verse 10. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. We must keep the word of his patience now, so that when the time of temptation, the Sunday law crisis, the mark of the beast crisis, comes upon us, he will keep us from the hour of temptation. He'll keep us. We've already covered that subject in past videos. But anyway, this unrighteous decree in Isaiah 10 and verse 1 is the same, prophetically speaking, as the decree in Daniel chapter 6. That is the Sunday law decree. All right? Daniel 3, here's some more decrees spoken of in the book of Daniel, and these are all pointing towards the Sunday law. Daniel 3, verses 9 through 12, they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree, that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast not into the den of lions, as in Daniel chapter 6, but cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. But both the fiery furnace and the den of lions represent the same thing, this persecution, okay? There are certain Jews which thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They're making the same accusation basically as those men there in Daniel chapter 6 made against Daniel. Okay. So they came to the king Nebuchadnezzar at that time and accused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego of disobeying the king's decree. Manuscript Releases, Volume 14, page 91, tells us, all who will exalt and worship the idol Sabbath, a day that God has not blessed. Yeah. My wife tells me, and she's reminding me that it's I-D-O-L, not I-D-L-E. No, this is I-D-O-L. This is an idol, just like a statue is an idol, or anything else can be an idol, okay? All who will, when it says all who will exalt and worship the idol Sabbath, that's Sunday. People have made an idol of Sunday. And Sunday is just, what's that? It's the first day of the week, but it's Baal worship. Baal worship, because Baal was the sun god of Phoenicia. Okay? All who will exalt and worship the idol Sabbath, a day that God has not blessed, help the devil and his angels with all the power of their God-given ability, which they have perverted to a wrong use. Inspired by another spirit which blinds their discernment, they cannot see that the exaltation of Sunday observance is entirely the institution of the Catholic Church. A corrupt union has been formed to tear down God's memorial of creation, the seventh day, which He hallowed and blessed and gave to man to be a sign between God and His people, to be observed throughout their generations forever. A period is coming when everyone will take sides between the Sabbath of the fourth commandment, which the Lord has sanctified and blessed, and the spurious Sabbath instituted by the man of sin, the Antichrist. And again, an idol Sabbath has been set up, as the golden image was set up in the plains of Dura. Okay, that golden image which Nebuchadnezzar set up in Daniel chapter 3 was an idol, and it represents the idol Sabbath at the end of the world. And as Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, issued a decree that all who would not bow down and worship this image should be killed, so a proclamation will be made that all who will not reverence the Sunday institution will be punished with imprisonment and death. Thus, the Sabbath of the Lord is trampled underfoot, and as we said in the previous study, the United States will follow in the steps of Medo-Persia in trampling underfoot God's law. But the Lord has declared, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and write grievousness which they have prescribed. Okay? That's from Manuscript Releases, Volume 14, page 91. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4, page 444. In the last conflict, the Sabbath will be the special point of controversy throughout all Christendom. And I know there are people who ridicule that idea, they poo-hoo that idea. They can if they want to. But I guarantee you this is going to happen. The Bible says it will happen, no matter what they say. In the last conflict, the Sabbath will be the special point of controversy throughout all Christendom. Secular rulers and religious leaders will unite to enforce the observance of the Sunday. And I can see this happening under the next administration, presidential administration. And as milder measures fail, the most oppressive laws will be enacted. It will be urged that the few who stand in opposition to an institution of the church and a law of the land ought not to be tolerated, and a decree will finally be issued denouncing them as deserving of the severest punishment, and giving the people liberty after a certain time to put them to death. Romanism in the Old World and apostate Protestantism in the New will pursue a similar course toward those who honor the divine precepts. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4, page 444. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 7. Part of it says, to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. So that decree involves the issue of worship. Who is worthy of our worship? God, our Creator, or man? That's the issue at the end of the world. That's the issue. So, again, here are several instances in Daniel chapter 3 of, what I'm doing here is I'm springboarding here from that verse we read there in Daniel chapter 6 and verse 7 that the one who violated that decree would be cast into the den of lions. Okay? If he prayed to any other than the king for 30 days, he would be cast into the den of lions. All right? So Daniel chapter 3, verses 6, 11, 15, 20, and 21. Whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Continuing on from verse 6 to verse 11. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Going on, the next verse. Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Nebuchadnezzar said. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So what does it mean spiritually, prophetically, to be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace, or to be cast into the den of lions? Prophets and Kings, page 513, tells us, as in the days of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so in the closing period of earth's history, the Lord will work mightily in behalf of those who stand steadfastly for the right. He who walked with the Hebrew worthies in the fiery furnace will be with his followers wherever they are. His abiding presence will comfort and sustain. In the midst of the time of trouble such as has not been since there was a nation, his chosen ones will stand unmoved. Satan, with all the host of evil, cannot destroy the weakest of God's saints. Angels that excel in strength will protect them, and in their behalf Jehovah will reveal himself as a God of gods, able to save to the uttermost those who have put their trust in him. Notice there in the middle of that paragraph that we just read, she says, in the midst of the time of trouble such as has not been since there was a nation. Sister White doesn't speak for nothing. She doesn't just come up with things out of the thin air. That she is partially quoting from Daniel 12 and verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. Okay? This is almost exact same wording. And she's doing that on purpose, I guarantee you. He's pointing us to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. This is the time of trouble. Okay? All right, Revelation 13, 11 to 18. It's sad that the Christian world, particularly the Protestant world, have never connected verses or passages in the book of Daniel in regard, Daniel chapter 6, the chapter that we're studying right now, or Daniel chapter 3. Okay, it's a shame that they have never connected, and I even wonder if some Seventh-day Adventists have thought to connect those chapters with Revelation 13, 11 to 18. Because, mark my word, dear friends, Daniel chapter 3 and Daniel chapter 6 are pointing us to Revelation 13, 11 to 18. Okay? And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast, that is the Roman Catholic Church, before him. This beast coming up out of the earth is United States. Okay? And he exercises all the power of the first beast, the one that came just before him, the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, whose deadly wound was healed in 1798. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, in the sight of the papacy, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. They should make, the United States is going to say to them that dwell on the earth by their legislative enactments that they should make an image to the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And just as a side note to this, what is the image here? Okay? Think of a man and a woman. Okay? The man representing the state or the government of a nation, and a woman representing the church. Okay? And Revelation 17 tells us this, that the great whore, Revelation 17, commits fornication with the kings of the earth. Okay? Commits fornication with the government. And when you have this fornication going on between church and state, just like in a physical relationship between a man and a woman, the woman conceives and bears a child. That child is the image of its parents. And in this case, especially an image to the woman, the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? So in Revelation 13, you have 3 entities. You have the government, you have the church, and you have the image of both. A child, of course, reflects the image of its parents. But in particular, this is the image to the beast, the Roman Catholic Church. Revelation 14, 6 through 12 tells us, and before I go to that, the decree. Where is the decree there in Revelation 13? Well, it's saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And Revelation, then a few verses before that, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. The inhabitants of the earth will be commanded by this decree to worship the Roman Catholic Church. And how do you do that? In this instance, how do you worship the Roman Catholic Church? By keeping the day that is a sign of His authority as the Sabbath. When you keep Sunday as the Sabbath, you are recognizing the papacy's authority above the authority of God, because the authority of God says that the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord. The papacy says, no, I did away with that. The first day of the week, Sunday, is the Sabbath of the Lord. Okay? So again, that decree is the decree that causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. And if you don't, as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed, just like they said in Daniel chapter 6. If you pray to anyone except for the king for 30 days, you will be thrown into the den of lions. And in Daniel chapter 3, if you don't fall down and worship the golden image which Nebuchadnezzar has set up, you will be thrown into the fiery furnace. Revelation 14:6-12, on the other hand, says, And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. So on the other hand, God says, the hour of my judgment is come, worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast in his image, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever. And they have no rest, day nor night, who worship the beast in his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So the choice will be clear. The choice will be clear. Do we obey man and keep the first day of the week as the Sabbath, or do we obey God and keep the seventh day as the Sabbath when that decree goes forth? Daniel chapter 6, verses 8 and 9. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. So notice that the law of the Medes and Persians, once the king signed whatever law it was, whatever the decree, it could not be changed. Not even by the king. Not even by the king himself. So this is representative, in a way, of the attitude of people towards the law of God. Okay? The way it has been through most of this world's history, this earth's history, the laws of nations, they refuse to change them. They refuse to alter them. But God's law, oh no, we'll change that. Okay? Sister White says in the book The Great Controversy, page 584, no error accepted by the Christian world strikes more boldly against the authority of heaven. None is more directly opposed to the dictates of reason. None is more pernicious in its results than the modern doctrine so rapidly gaining ground that God's law is no longer binding upon men. Every nation has its laws which command respect and obedience. No government could exist without them. And can it be conceived that the Creator of the heavens and the earth has no law to govern the beings he has made? Suppose that prominent ministers were publicly to teach that the statutes which govern their land and protect the rights of its citizens were not obligatory, that they restricted the liberties of the people and therefore ought not to be obeyed. How long would such men be tolerated in the pulpit? But is it a graver offense to disregard the laws of states and nations than to trample upon those divine precepts which are the foundation of all government? It would be far more consistent for nations to abolish their statutes and permit the people to do as they please than for the ruler of the universe to annul his law and leave the world without a standard to condemn the guilty or justify the obedient. Would we know the result of making void the law of God? The experiment has been tried. Terrible were the scenes enacted in France when atheism became the controlling power. It was then demonstrated to the world that to throw off the restraints which God has imposed is to accept the rule of the cruelest of tyrants, that is, Satan. When the standard of righteousness is set aside, the way is open for the prince of evil to establish his power in the earth. Yes, when the standard of righteousness is set aside, God's law, when it's set aside, the way is open for the prince of evil, the devil, to establish his power in the earth. And again, everyone, there may be some who are watching this video who are of the mistaken opinion that the law of God, it's just nailed to the cross. We don't have to keep that old law, Moses' law. So you mean to tell me it's more consistent for God to disannul his law than it is for, say, the United States to do away with its Constitution? Okay. Not sure if I should read this entire next passage here from an article by A.T. Jones, For What Are the Powers That Be Ordained? Let's go ahead and read that. Now, he says, now the same evil principle illustrated in this case is being practiced in the United States today. And it is being worked in the same way precisely. Preachers professing great interest in the working man or great reward for the safety of the state will go to the legislature with a petition and get someone of their kind to introduce a bill for the enactment of a rigorous Sunday law or for the repeal of a protective clause in an already rigorous law, and all this professedly as, quote-unquote, police regulation, or in quote-unquote, in the interest of prohibition, or anything else but what it really is. And by pious pretensions, honeyed phrases, and fair speeches, they conceal their real purpose, succeed in hoodwinking the legislature, and secure the passage of their innocent-appearing bill. But as soon as their will has been made law, their interest in the working man or in prohibition, etc., suddenly ceases, and the whole tide of inquisition, prosecution, and persecution is turned against a few innocent people who choose to worship God on Saturday instead of on Sunday. This thing was actually accomplished 2 years ago in Arkansas, and in all the working of the Sunday law so secured, we have not been able to learn of a single case in which the person prosecuted was not a Seventh-day Adventist or a Seventh-day Baptist. But the efforts of the lawyers of that state and the earnest leadership of Senator Crockett, the legislature has remedied the iniquitous statute. Thank God for Senator Crockett. And I think it's either Davy Crockett or the son of Davy Crockett. Yeah, okay, my wife is nodding her head. Yes, it was the son of Davy Crockett thank God for the son of Davy Crockett. He must have had a good dad. You know, study his history, his life story. Interesting. Nor is this evil confined to Arkansas. In California, the present year, the same scheme was tried on the legislature, but it failed. The same thing was tried in the legislature of Minnesota about the same time as in California, and there too, at almost the same moment, the real intent of the thing was discovered and the scheme frustrated. In Texas also and other states it has been attempted, and all within the present year, but so far we believe all have failed, because the evil was discovered before it was too late. And what those men did, notice, and this is the reason why I have this statement in this study, what you see there in the bold. And what those men did in the law of Medo-Persia, and what these parties have done and have tried to do in the laws of these states, that's precisely what the National Reform Party is aiming to do in the Constitution and the laws of the nation, the United States, that is. So it's interesting here what A.T. Jones is saying here in his article, For What Are the Powers That Be Ordained. He's saying the same thing that these wicked men there in Daniel chapter 6 wanted to do with in persecuting Daniel, they're trying to do here in the United States. And I'm not only putting this statement to show that similarity, but also to show the fact that he's mentioning Medo-Persia and the United States in the same context, thus making my point further that Medo-Persia represents Medo-Persia in Daniel chapter 6 and in chapter 11. Now, don't forget Daniel chapter 11. I'm putting one thing I failed to do, and I meant to do it earlier, actually, in the last presentation. The reason why I'm even getting into Daniel chapter 6 is to build a solid foundation to show that when you read Daniel chapter 11, those first two verses there, this is speaking again about the United States. Okay, so in both instances, Medo-Persia represents the United States. And furthermore, in another article by A.T. Jones in the Medical Missionary, December 4th, 1907, page 385, the Medo-Persian government was an absolute monarchy also. Oh, I'm sorry, back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Back up. In the Medo-Persian Empire, the principle of government was different from that of Babylon. Now, there's a point I'm trying to make here. Please follow me. In the Medo-Persian Empire, the principle of government was different from that of Babylon. Babylon, as we have seen, was not only an absolute monarchy, but an autocracy, a one-man government, a one-man absolutism. Can you think of another power that is, or institution that is a one-man absolutism, that is an absolute monarchy? The word of the kings was the law, and the law was changeable as the will and word of the king might change. That was Babylon, okay? The law was changeable as the will and the word of the king might change. The king was the source of the law. His word was the law for all others. But as for himself, there was no restriction of law. Now notice, the Medo-Persian government was an absolute monarchy also. There also the word of the king was the law. But with this all-important difference from Babylon, that when once the word of the king had gone forth as the law, that law could not be changed nor reversed even by the king himself. See, different from Babylon. Babylon, the king, it was just a one-man government, one-man absolutism. It was an absolute monarchy. And if he wanted to change the law, the king would say, "Okay, no, I'm changing the law now, and so instead of the law being this, it's going to be something else." Okay, that's the way it was in Babylon. But with Medo-Persia, no, it was an absolute monarchy. But once the word of the king had gone forth as the law, that law could not be changed nor reversed even by the king himself. The king himself was bound, even against himself, by his own word or decree. And that shows there in Daniel chapter 6. The king, when he realized that he had been duped by these governors and princes, and etc., he would have liked to have changed the law right then and there, but he couldn't, because the law of the Medes and Persians was, hey, okay, king, once you make a decree, once you make a law, you can't change it. Not even yourself. Okay? The government of Medo-Persia, therefore, was a government, notice this now, the government of Medo-Persia, therefore, was a government of law. Its principle was the supremacy of the law. Okay? So what do we hear today? When I was a kid, I used to not hear this. I don't think we've ever heard it before, say, 20 years ago or less. That often it is said, especially among the conservatives in this country, that our nation, the United States, is a government of law, or something close to that, okay? They emphasize we are a government of laws, okay? They don't realize it, but they are reflecting the government, the ancient government of Medo-Persia. It also was a government of law. So here I put in here the difference between literal Babylon and Medo-Persia. Literal Babylon was an absolute monarchy, okay, like the papacy. Though Medo-Persia was also an absolute monarchy, and though the word of the king was law, yet once the word of the king had gone forth as the law, that law could not be changed nor reversed even by the king himself. The king was bound by his own word or decree. Then we have the difference between spiritual Babylon and the United States. Spiritual Babylon, the papacy, was and is an absolute monarchy, just like Babylon, ancient Babylon of old. Though the United States is not an absolute monarchy, yet its government is a government of law, as was the government of Medo-Persia. Its principle is the supremacy of the law, i.e., the United States Constitution. And note that John Adams, the second president of the United States, wrote, "We are a nation of laws, not of men." Okay? And, John Adams didn't just pull this out of thin air. Okay? He was, if I dare presume to go into the mind of John Adams, John Adams, he was familiar with and made statements about the papacy, about the Jesuits. So whenever he made this statement, "We are a nation of laws and not of men," he was reflecting the fact that here in this United States we have a constitution. It is the law of the land. And we are different than the laws, and he wasn't just thinking about the papacy, but also the nations of Europe. Okay? They were nations of men. The papacy especially. Europe and its kings were oppressive because they learned to be that way from the papacy. It's very likely that if the papacy had not put forth such a terrible example, a wicked example of what true Christianity is, quite possibly the kings of Europe wouldn't have been so oppressive and wicked as they were. All right, so hopefully now you understand even more clearly why I'm saying that Medo-Persia represents the United States. Medo-Persia in the ancient world represents the United States. And as we will see later in this study, Medo-Persia, if you look there, we have there, I think I have the verse probably already in this study, but I guess I'll wait for that. Well, maybe I'll just mention it right now. If you go to Daniel chapter 8, I think I have it in this study. Daniel chapter 8, Medo-Persia had 2 horns. The United States has 2 horns. Medo-Persia, it was Medo and Persia. You had the 2 nations. The United States, it is republicanism and Protestantism. Okay? But we haven't got that far yet. So, Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. So you have here in your notes Hebrews 12, 18 to 24. I'm not going to take the time to read that entire passage, but I'll just read the bold. Emphasis is made here, but ye are come unto Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. Okay? He's comparing the literal with the heavenly or the spiritual, okay? Because he's saying at the beginning of this passage, for ye are not come unto the mount that might be touched, and that burned with fire, nor with blackness, and so on and so forth. Ye are come unto Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. All right? So, and that was from Hebrews, you can read that, Hebrews 12, 18 to 24. Review and Herald, February 25th, 1896, says, men and women, because I'm asking the question, should we pray toward literal Jerusalem like Daniel did? Kind of got ahead of myself there. Because it says that Daniel, he opened his windows in his chamber toward Jerusalem. So are we to do that still? Review and Herald, February 25th, 1896, tells us, men and women may study the will of God with profit. Let young men and young women, while the dew of youth is upon them, begin to study the Word of God, which expresses His will. The steps of Christ are certainly marked out in the Word. Go where they can be found today. Do not seek to go back to the land where Christ's feet trod years ago. And where do we see many people? You have people in just all denominations going to Israel. They go on these vacations there, and they go to the land of Israel. They want to walk where Jesus walked where the disciples walked, and where ancient Israel and the kings walked, and so on and so forth. And she says, do not seek to go back to the land where Christ's feet trod years ago. Christ says, he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. We can know far more of Christ by following Him step by step in the work of redemption, seeking the lost and the perishing, than by journeying to Old Jerusalem. Ashamedly, even Seventh-day Adventists take these long journeys over the sea, whether plane or ship, and they go to Israel to look at these same spots and to walk in the same spots where Jesus and the disciples and the apostles walked. But we are told we can know far more of Christ by following Him step by step in the work of redemption, seeking the lost and the perishing as Jesus did, than by journeying to Old Jerusalem. Christ has taken His people into His church. He has swept away every ceremony of the ancient type. He has given no liberty to restore these rites or to substitute anything that will recall the old literal sacrifices. This speaks very pointedly to those who try to keep the feast days. The Lord requires of His people spiritual sacrifices alone. Everything pertaining to His worship is placed under the superintendence of His Holy Spirit. Jesus said that the Father would send the Holy Spirit in His name to teach His disciples all things and to bring all things unto their remembrance that He had said unto them. The curse rests upon Jerusalem. The curse rests upon Jerusalem. The Lord has obliterated those things which men would worship in and about Jerusalem. Yet many hold in reverence literal objects in Palestine, like these artifacts, etc., while they neglect to behold Jesus as their advocate in the heaven of heavens. So you have those many people in the United States that say, if you don't support Israel, you are cursed. Nonsense. Nonsense. Jerusalem rests under a curse because they rejected their Messiah. We have here Review and Herald, July 30th, 1901. Among our workers are some who feel that a great object would be gained if their feet could tread the soil of old Jerusalem. But God's cause and work will never be advanced by His workers wandering about to find where Jesus traveled and wrought His miracles. Would you trace the footsteps of Christ? Behold Him in that hovel, ministering to the poor. See Him at that sick bed, comforting the suffering and speaking hope and courage to the desponding. Those who walk in the footsteps of Jesus will do as He did. Whosoever will come after me, He said, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. The city of Jerusalem is no longer a sacred place. The curse of God rests upon it because of the rejection and crucifixion of Christ. A dark blot of guilt rests upon it, and never again will it be a sacred place until it has been cleansed by the purifying fires of heaven. Now, dear friends, look at that sentence that I just read to you. A dark blot of guilt rests upon it, upon the city of Jerusalem. And I would say, because Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, this is the same thing as saying a dark blot of guilt rests upon Israel. Now, if a dark blot rests upon Jerusalem, Israel, because of its rejection and crucifixion of Christ, what do you think God thinks of so-called Christians in this United States of America who insist on supporting Israel? While Israel, most of the Jews, they continue to reject Christ as the Messiah and justify His crucifixion. Do you think a curse might rest upon Americans for supporting Israel out there in the Middle East right now? At the time when this sin-cursed earth is purified from every stain of sin, Christ will again stand upon the Mount of Olives after the 1,000-year millennium there, as depicted there in Revelation chapter 20. As His feet rest upon it, it will part asunder and become a great plain prepared for the city of God. Actually, that would be chapter 21, I think. Anyway. Oh, also Zechariah chapter 14. All right. So, Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. The Sanctified Life, page 43, tells us, the decree goes forth from the king. Daniel is acquainted with the purpose of his enemies to ruin him, but he does not change his course in a singular particular. What did he do? He gave thanks before his God, prayed as he did before time, 3 times a day. But he does not change his course in a single particular. With calmness he performs his accustomed duties, and at the hour of prayer he goes to his chamber, and with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he offers his prayers, his petitions to the God of heaven. By his course of action, he fearlessly declares that no earthly power has the right to come between him and his God and tell him to whom he should or should not pray. Noble man of principle, he stands before the world today a praiseworthy example of Christian boldness and fidelity. He turns to God with all his heart, although he knows that death is the penalty for his devotion. So when the Sunday law comes upon God's people, when the hour of temptation comes upon God's people, what will we do? What will you do? What will I do? Are we going to be like Daniel and not change our course in a single particular, continue to worship on the seventh-day Sabbath, to rest on that day? Review and Herald, February 7th, 1893. It will require moral courage to do God's work unflinchingly. Those who do this can give no place to self-love, to selfish considerations, ambition, love of ease, or desire to shun the cross. We are commanded to cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet. Shall we labor to make the name of God a praise in the earth? Shall we obey his voice, or shall we listen to the soothing voice of the evil one and be rocked to a fatal slumber just on the eve of eternal realities? We are on the eve of eternal realities, dear friends. And when we reach the time of the Sunday law in the very near future, we will be especially on the eve of eternal realities. And we should not be listening to the soothing voice of the evil one and be rocked to a fatal slumber. The truth is everything to us, or it is nothing. Let those who want to make a name in the world, like a lot of Seventh-day Adventists ashamedly, let those who want to make a name in the world go with the world. If you want to do that, if you're all concerned about, like the recent so-called director of religious liberty and something else here in the United States, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, all concerned about what the world thinks about Seventh-day Adventists. If you're all concerned about that more than you are concerned about what's doing right, just go with the world. Leave the Adventist Church. Let those who would serve God obey God and not man. In the great conflict between faith and unbelief, the whole Christian world will be involved. All will take sides. Some may not apparently engage in the conflict on either side. They may not appear to take sides against the truth, but they will not come out boldly for Christ. Why? Through fear of losing property or suffering reproach. All such are numbered with the enemies of Christ. For Christ says, He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad. Now, look at that the part there that is in bold. It says, some may not apparently engage in the conflict on either side. In other words, they're neutral. And I should have put the statement in this study concerning the sin of neutrality. Maybe my wife could look that up while I'm speaking here. There is a statement against being neutral in a crisis. Okay? Because I don't want anyone here thinking that this means, whenever it says they may not appear to take sides against the truth. No. It says all will take sides. Some may not apparently engage in the conflict on either side. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. To not apparently engage in the conflict on either side is to be neutral. And we'll read a statement here about neutrality in a crisis. They may not appear to take sides against the truth. They may not appear to take sides against the truth, but they will not come out boldly for Christ. You know, coming out boldly for Christ doesn't always mean that you're going to speak loudly the truth. But it may mean that you will just go about your work quietly, as did Daniel, but you're going to show in some way or fashion that you stand for the truth and you're practicing the truth. Like, and what Daniel did there is an example of that. He didn't change his course in any particular. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Say it again. Neutrality in a crisis. Neutrality in a religious crisis is the worst kind of hostility toward God. That's enough. There'll be some that will be familiar with this statement. Some won't, but it does say that. And what greater crisis can you face than the Sunday law crisis? Okay, we'll just continue on here. Review and Herald, February 7th, 1893 is where that one came from. Here's another one here from Review and Herald, same article, February 7th, 1893. Some are flattering themselves that a more auspicious time is coming when God will vindicate his honor by lifting up his holy law. Many who now look upon the cross as too heavy to bear think that they will then obey the truth and triumph with it. But in maintaining the right, it is not safe because of circumstances to yield in any degree firm adherence to duty or to teach others that they may yield with comparative safety. What astonishing deception. This is from volume 3 of the Testimonies, page 380. What astonishing deception and fearfulness and fearful blindness had like a dark cloud covered Israel. This is I think in the chapter Mount Carmel or something. This blindness and apostasy had not closed about them suddenly, as in the Adventist church. You know, apostasy didn't come overnight. It hasn't come since, the COVID thing back a few years ago. It had come upon them gradually as they had not heeded the word of reproof and warning which the Lord had sent to them because of their pride and their sins. And now, in this fearful crisis, in the presence of the idolatrous priest and the apostate king, they remained neutral. Now, here's the statement. If God abhors one sin above another of which his people are guilty, it is doing nothing in case of an emergency. Indifference and neutrality in a religious crisis is regarded of God as a grievous crime and equal to the very worst type of hostility against God. And again, that's volume 3 of the Testimonies, page 280. Thank you, Debbie. So again, all will take sides. Some may not apparently engage in the conflict on either side. In other words, they're neutral, and that is the worst kind of hostility against God. They may not appear to take sides against the truth, but they will not come out boldly for Christ and obey no matter the cost. Through why? Through fear of losing property or suffering reproach. This is Revelation 13:11 to 18, brothers and sisters. All such are numbered with the enemies of Christ. For Christ says, He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad. Review and Herald, February 27, 1893. So, now, again, in this next paragraph in that same article, some are flattering themselves that a more auspicious time is coming when God will vindicate His honor by lifting up His holy law. Many who now look upon the cross as too heavy to bear think they will then obey the truth and triumph with it. But in maintaining the right, it is not safe because of circumstances to yield in any degree firm adherence to duty or to teach others that they may yield with comparative safety. This is like, some have mentioned, and I think correctly, like in Daniel chapter 3, the three Hebrew worthies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they could have appeared to tie their shoes. So they would have appeared to be bowing before that golden image of Nebuchadnezzar. But do we really want to appear to obey man's law and disobey God's law? They could say, well, we weren't bowing to the image. We were just tying our shoes. No. The Bible tells us to avoid the appearance of evil. Okay? Such a course is like that of Judas, who sold his Lord to his enemies, fully believing that Christ would manifest his miraculous power and give his enemies another evidence of his divinity. Notice, Judas never recovered the ground lost through his presumption. This is a lesson to us. If during the Sunday law crisis that we stoop to making it appear that we're obeying the law of the land, which requires us to honor Sunday as the Sabbath, guess what? We will never recover the ground we have lost by doing that. That's a fearful thing. To place ourselves in a position where we have an appearance of yielding is a new position for this people, Seventh-day Adventists, that is. It is a new experience, a departure from the principles to which we have adhered, which have made us what we are today, a people whom God has prospered, a people who have the Lord of hosts with them. The next one is from Sanctified Life, page 44. Speaking of Daniel there in Daniel chapter 6, his adversaries watch him an entire day. 3 times he has repaired to his chamber, and 3 times the voice of earnest intercession has been heard. The next morning, the complaint is made to the king that Daniel, one of the captives of Judah, has set at variance his decree. When the monarch heard these words, his eyes were at once opened to see the snare that had been set. He was sorely displeased with himself for having passed such a decree, and labored till the going down of the sun to devise a plan by which Daniel might be delivered. But the prophet's enemies had anticipated this, and they came before the king with these words, Now know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king establisheth may be changed. And because of this, I anticipate that there's going to be, when Sunday legislation begins to be agitated in this country, there are going to be people in our government that are going to be against this. But the majority will be in favor of it. But there's going to be a struggle between the two sides for a while. But eventually, the evil will prevail. The Great Controversy, 630. Now, I didn't put a heading for this, but I'm capitalizing on the fact that Sister White says that Daniel was, his voice of earnest intercession had been heard. Okay? He's praying 3 times a day. Yet to human sight, it will appear that the people of God must soon seal their testimony with their blood, as did the martyrs before them. They themselves begin to fear that the Lord has left them to fall by the hand of their enemies. It is a time of fearful agony. Day and night they cry unto the Lord for deliverance. The wicked exult, and the jeering cry is heard, Where now is your faith? Why does not God deliver you out of our hands if you are indeed His people? But the waiting ones remember Jesus dying upon Calvary's cross, and the chief priests and rulers shouting in mockery, He saved others, Himself He cannot save. If He be the King of Israel, let Him come down from the cross, and we will believe Him. Like Jacob, all are wrestling with God. Their countenances express their internal struggle. Paleness sits upon every face, yet they cease not their earnest intercession. Just like with Daniel, earnest intercession was heard from him. Okay, coming to the end of this study, Matthew chapter 26, 38 to 45. Notice the similarity here. Just as Daniel prayed 3 times a day, so Christ prayed 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. And he went a little farther, and fell on his face, and prayed, that is the first time, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Do you think Daniel prayed that prayer? Something similar to that? And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, What, could ye not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them, and went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then cometh he to his disciples, and saith unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Again, let me emphasize the fact that Sister White says that Daniel prayed 3 times as he repaired to his chamber. And 3 times the voice of earnest intercession has been heard. Think of that, earnest intercession. Daniel didn't change his course one bit, but I guarantee you his prayer was different than any other time. Okay? He was praying earnestly about this situation. He knew that those men had set a trap for him. And he knew that by his praying unto his God 3 times a day, that he was going to be thrown into the den of lions if the Lord permitted it. He was praying probably very similar to Jesus' prayer, not as my will, but as thou wilt. John 15:20, Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, Jesus said, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my saying, they will keep yours also. And lastly, Review and Herald, April 14th, 1896. This is why I keep saying, what you read there in these stories in the Bible, they represent, it's not me saying, the Bible says this, these stories represent the end of the world. So here you have Christ in this passage here. Christ will be represented in the person of those who accept the truth and who identify their interest with that of their Lord. The world will be enraged at them in the same way that they were enraged at Christ. And the disciples of Christ will know that they are to be treated no better than was their Lord. But Christ will surely identify his interest with that of those who accept him as their personal Savior. Every insult, every reproach, every false accusation made against them by those who have turned their ears away from the truth and are turned unto fables will be charged upon the guilty ones as done to Christ in the person of his saints. When Christ was upon this earth, the world preferred Barabbas. And today, the world and the churches are making the same choice. Notice, the scenes of the betrayal, the rejection, and the crucifixion of Christ have been reenacted and will again be reenacted on an immense scale. In other words, all over the world during the Sunday law crisis. People will be filled with the attributes of the enemy, and with them his delusions will have great power. Just to that decree that light is refused will there be misconception and misunderstanding. Those who reject Christ and choose Barabbas work under a ruinous deception. Misrepresentation and false witness will grow to open rebellion. The eye being evil, the whole body will be full of darkness. Those who give their affections to any leader but Christ will find themselves under the control, body, soul, and spirit, of an infatuation that is so entrancing that under its power souls turn away from hearing the truth to believe a lie. They are ensnared and taken, and by their every action they cry, "Release unto us Barabbas, but crucify Christ." Review and Herald, April 14th, 1896. So, how will you, as Seventh-day Adventist, respond to the Sunday law decree when it comes upon the whole world? And it is coming soon. I have no doubt whatsoever. The prophecy which we have proclaimed for over 160 years is soon to come to pass. Are we ready? Are we ready? If you appreciate this type of content, then I would encourage you to tap that like button so that it can be sent to others who are hungering for the bread of life. And if you have any comments or questions, we would invite you to place them at the bottom of this video. I will surely read every one of them. And if you haven't subscribed, we would highly encourage you to do so. Thank you, dear friends, for joining us here at Jewels of Truth. We hope and pray that you will have a good day in the Lord.